So today guys, we have a bit of a different video, but nonetheless something I've been looking forward to making for quite a while now. And today's video is going to be how we plan on scaling into a $500,000 XRP trade. And in this video, we're going to cover our thesis here for XRP, why we think XRP is about to take off, why we think the cryptocurrency market is in the final stages before we should start to see expansion here, especially for Bitcoin. And as a part of our thesis, we're also going to have a look at price targets here for XRP. Then we're going to jump down into a lower time frame here and find entry levels for XRP. And then once we cover our lower time frame entries, we're going to have a look at our take profit strategy and have a look at exactly where we think XRP's price is going to end up. And that is going to be based on past examples of charts like Litecoin, for example, where we did see full extension. So an exciting video here today, guys, and we're going to cover a lot, and it's going to be great for anybody that's new to trading or never actually scaled into a higher time frame position here, which could last over the course of a few months. And we're going to break all of that down today and give my full thesis on why I think it is time to start scaling into this trade and how we are actually going to go ahead and achieve a $500,000 profit here on this trade. So a lot to cover in today's video. Let's jump into it. So I think the first place to start when building our thesis here for a higher time frame trade is where do we think we are in the cycle, and we have to have a look at a lot of macro factors as well, like the stock market, for example. So the first thing we're going to have a look at here is the S&P 500 index and have a look at where we think we are. And as you can see, we actually have broken out into a new all-time high for the S&P, so things do look bullish here for the stock market. And the reason that's important is because when we've seen Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market go on previous bull runs, it was back here in 2020 and 2021 once we did see the stock market actually break out into a new all-time high, which then led crypto to go and do the same and was the perfect environment where you see coins like XRP shoot up hundreds of percents. And if you have a look back to 2017 for the previous bull run for Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market, you can see that once the stock market had broken out into a new all-time high, this was when we see not only expansion in the stock market but expansion in crypto. And right now we are starting to see similar behavior here from the stock market, as it has just broken out into a new all-time high in the previous week, while at the same time also seeing the Nasdaq break out into a new all-time high, seeing the Dow Jones inches away from also breaking out into a new all-time high. And most importantly here, the US dollar actually breaking down after being in a range that's lasted over 1,200 days. And what you can see here is that back in 2020 and 2021, when the US dollar was actually breaking down, was when we seen the most previous crypto bull market. And then back in 2017, when the dollar was also breaking down, right here is when we've seen the bull market that came before that. And that right now, what we're starting to see is the US dollar actually break down yet again, giving us another confirmation signal that we are in the right environment to see not only a Bitcoin bull run, but a bull run for the rest of the cryptocurrency market. Now, another thing I like to have a look at here is the M2 global liquidity supply, which is usually a foretelling sign of if we are seeing liquidity actually flow into markets. And what you can see here is that if you overlay the M2 over Bitcoin here, the first thing you'll see is that once you start to see the M2 money supply actually open up in this period here, it wasn't until 9 months later things started to open up here for Bitcoin, and we've seen Bitcoin actually get to the same levels as the M2 global liquidity, then both chilling out. And then after the M2 had actually paused out for a period here and consolidated, we started to see it expand again in August of last year. And then what happens in October and November, we start to see the Bitcoin price chart actually catch up here to the M2 money supply and top out at similar regions before the M2 actually cooling off, going into a bit of a corrective stage here, which Bitcoin then followed going into its own corrective period earlier this year. And then ever since January, we've seen the M2 money supply actually expand and open up here, seeing a lot of liquidity flow into the global markets. And then only recently in April, we've actually seen Bitcoin shoot up and set a new all-time high in May here, before consolidating the same way the M2 actually consolidated at these same levels here. And then what we started to see was the M2 global liquidity actually expand from there. And now I believe we're at those similar levels where we should start to see Bitcoin actually catch up to the global liquidity supply and expand from these regions here, which should take us to a price of roughly $147,000 to $150,000 for Bitcoin. And I think that in this next move here, when Bitcoin actually does expand, is when we should start to see coins like XRP actually open up and shoot to the upside here. As you can see on a higher time frame picture here, XRP has been in quite a long bear market, gone into what I believe is its mid-cycle correction, and now what we are starting to see is that after nearly 216 days here of sideways action for XRP, I believe we are on the verge of seeing XRP's price chart actually break out from here. And if we have a look back to XRP back in 2017 here, you can see this is XRP's bear market. This is the mid-cycle correction, which then goes on to that final explosive move here for XRP, which ended up giving you the high back in 2017. And if you have a look here, this mid-cycle correction lasted 208 days, and so far the one we've been in is 216 days. So not only are we seeing similar amounts of time here, but we're actually seeing quite similar structures, as I do believe we are in these final stages here for XRP, where we have revisited this range high multiple times, had our final ABC correction, not setting any new lows here, and now I believe we are in these final stages, similar to how price is acting today, where we have seen those similar highs, an ABC correction, not setting any new lows here, and now we are in that stage where XRP, it has been grinding to the upside and is actually back at a very important resistance level, which I do believe once XRP breaks through this resistance level, which is about roughly $2.30, we should start to see it move to the top of this range here, which is roughly 260, which is further confirmation that XRP is playing out similar to the way it did in 2017. On top of that, we also have Litecoin here, which you can see Litecoin's bear market, Litecoin's mid-cycle correction, which then goes on for its expansion, which ends up being a full 4.236 extension, plus a little bit more. And what you can see here is that XRP's price is actually playing out quite similar to Litecoin's mid-cycle correction. And just like in the end of Litecoin's correction here, it went in for that ABC after coming back to the top of its range highs here. What you've seen after that ABC is a little bit of a corrective phase before it eventually worked its way out, consolidated again, before then actually expanding and going on to set those new highs. Similar to the way XRP played out in 2017 in these final moments. And again, similar to what we are seeing today. And again, further confirmation of this would be seeing XRP move to the top of its range here, which is at roughly $2.60. So that is my XRP thesis. And I think that we see all the confirmation we need in the stock market and Bitcoin, which can lead to XRP actually expanding out of a mid-cycle correction, similar to the way it has in its past. And the price targets here are again a full 4.236 extension, like we've seen on Litecoin, from its mid-cycle correction, which ended up pretty much nailing the top of Litecoin. As you can see, it went a little bit higher. And if we have a look at XRP here, a full 4.236 extension should get us to those $9 levels. And I do think similar to the way Litecoin played out, we could even see price shoot a little bit higher for a small period of time before then eventually crashing. And I think that if XRP is to perform similar, we could even see $10 here. So as far as price targets, I will be looking for the $9 to $10 range when it comes to taking this trade. Now, as far as the lower time frame entry goes here, I believe it is all based on the way that Bitcoin plays out at the current levels that it's sitting at. And we'll jump in here on the 30-minute time frame to have a look at what I'm seeing here for Bitcoin. And right now for Bitcoin, I say there's two ways that this can play out. The first way that this can play out is that if Bitcoin actually breaks this trend line here and pushes to the downside, that I can see it actually grabbing liquidity from the bottom side, similar to the way Bitcoin actually did at the top of this range here, where you can see it, where it actually pushed above here, grabbed liquidity, and then ended up breaking down to where price is today. I could see a similar thing playing out, but on the downside here, where it actually pushes to the downside, breaks this trend, grabs liquidity from the bottom side, and then ends up forming a bottom down there, and then pushes back to that old all-time high, which is now marked as this red line here on the chart. Another way I can see this playing out is the blue example here, where if Bitcoin actually ends up holding here, what we could see is that rally back to that old all-time high, where Bitcoin's price actually falls short, goes into a little bit of a correction here, and then we actually see Bitcoin price shoot to the upside, break through the all-time high, like we see in the blue example here, which on the right side here is how Bitcoin actually performed once it had broken out from its all-time high set back in 2021. And I do believe we are in these final late stages of this corrective structure, and that what we are looking for is Bitcoin to hold support here, rally to the top side, find a bit of rejection just shy of the old all-time high, and then we should start to see it break out and expand. And in this moment here where we actually see Bitcoin shoot up is when I think XRP will shoot to that $2.60 region and consolidate like we've seen in our previous examples. Even if we have a look back to 2017 XRP here, we can see that once XRP's price shot back to the top of this range, there was a bit of a consolidation and a pullback here before then shooting up. And then at the same time, if we have a look at Litecoin here back in 2017, once it did actually shoot out to the top of its range here, there was a bit of a pullback and consolidation before then eventually shooting to the upside, which I believe is likely to be in this moment here on the right side for Bitcoin. So as far as scaling into this trade on lower time frames, what I'm seeing here is two scenarios in which Bitcoin can play out. And I think that the way Bitcoin plays out here is the way that XRP's price will end up playing out. So if Bitcoin is to perform like that, then I see XRP potentially either holding these levels or coming back for one final pullback and back test here before then shooting to the upside. It even looks like it is starting to form a little bit of a bottom here. However, if things do get worse, these are my two entry zones where I will be looking to add, and that if XRP's price at any point gets back above $2.30, which is the top of this range here, this is also another confirmation trigger to add. So that is the entry model we have for this trade, which is either, again, XRP crossing above this $2.30 threshold, which would be the first entry, or XRP getting down to these two entry targets that we have here, which entry target 1 here is actually the top of XRP's consolidation range that it's been in for the last week or two. And entry target 2 here is a higher time frame support and resistance level that I think price could fall down to if Bitcoin is actually going to break down here. Now, as far as the take profit strategy goes for this trade, what I'm aiming for the channel is a $500,000 XRP long here, and the way that I have marked that out and calculated that is as such. So what we have here is a long position with roughly 85,000 XRP in it, and if we do have the average entry price of around $2.30, which is what we're aiming for, then once this take profit strategy here is completed, we should hit a profit of just over $500,000. And this is the take profit strategy. So the first take profit level we're looking to get out at is $8. The second one is $9. And the third one is $10. And I plan on taking 30% at each level, which is 25,500 XRP at each take profit level. Now, I'm also going to leave 10% in the trade in case I'm wrong and XRP runs to $15, $20, $40. I've seen some crazy price targets out there. So I do plan on leaving 10% on the trade just in case I'm being a little conservative here. However, if I was to close out 30% at each of these price levels, it adds up to just over $500,000, allowing about $12,500 for fees or any slippage that might go wrong in the trade. And if you're wondering how to calculate this here, what you should be able to find on your exchange here on the right side in the top right corner here, and if you click this little calculator here, you can actually see how much you can potentially make, lose, or risk on a trade. And for us here, the entry price should average out at about $2.30. We're planning on closing at $8, $9, and $10 here, which is an average of a $9 close. And we're hoping to get 85,000 XRP in the trade, which is well over $500,000 US. However, we are leaving 10% in case price ends up going higher. So this is our take profit strategy, and it should end up profiting us over $500,000 at the end of this trade. So if Bitcoin is to play out like I do think it could in the blue example here, then what we are looking for is to actually begin entering this trade soon. So in the coming days and weeks, guys, we'll start to see how Bitcoin is actually going to play out here. If we are going to break down further here and actually sweep these lows and the liquidity down here at 105,000, or are we going to break to the upside here, grab the liquidity from just shy of the old all-time high here at 112,000, pull back, and then do we get our entry here for XRP? Either way, the most important thing for me is to keep the entry below $2.30, which you can see is this black trend line here, which sits at about $2.30. And that, guys, is the XRP trade thesis video. And there'll be further videos coming where we start to actually scale into this trade, take positions. And right now we're just waiting and seeing how Bitcoin's going to play out, as I do believe we still are just in that waiting room before Bitcoin does break to the upside here. And today's video was a little heads up on what I'm planning here on the channel and what I'm looking for as far as taking this XRP long trade. So guys, I'll be back throughout the week if I do end up scaling in and actually taking any positions here on XRP. Otherwise, I'll be back on Friday for the weekly recap video, or we'll take a look at how all this is playing out if we can start to see Bitcoin break to the top of this range here. Either way, guys, I'll be keeping you up to date on what I see playing out here on the charts. Have a good rest of your week. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, it helps a lot. If you have any questions about anything we've covered in this XRP trade, or any queries about the thesis here or the entries, feel free to drop your questions below in the comments section. So until Friday, guys, have a good rest of your week.